Welcome to the final part of the Aquila display cabinet. So in this one, we're going to be working on finishing off the cabinet by putting together our drawers. Now, although the cabinet is almost completely finished, this part is going to take a decent amount of work because obviously putting together 3 different drawers does take a little bit of effort. So we're starting off with this really beautiful piece of 6/4 cherry that I had that I resawed down so that I could make some very nice looking drawers. I love the fact that this wood was almost perfectly quarter sawn, so we're gonna get this really nice straight grain on all 4 sides of our drawer boxes. It was a really beautiful idea in my mind, and I really liked the way that it looked. I also made sure to keep 3 specific pieces in order so that we would have a nice continuous grain flowing across our drawer fronts. Now the goal of these drawers was to have that box joint joinery showing on the front edge. Now I know some people like this, most people don't from what I understand, but for me personally, I really love the look of it. I do like the look of visible joinery, it's something that I've always found very interesting, and there's something specifically about box joints where I really like seeing them in kind of the final piece. There's just something about that repetitive geometric pattern with the end grain that I just really find visually interesting. And I think it's kind of the perfect little detail to add on to those drawer fronts that kind of helps break up the overall somewhat boring grain that it might be. Now, in my original design, my drawers were a little bit more complicated, but near the end of the project, I decided to go a little bit easier on myself and just make straight drawer boxes that would fit into the cabinet. And so these ones were, again, they're just a nice simple drawer box where it's just 4 sides with a bottom. And I figured this would be the easiest way to just kind of get this project done because, again, at this point, I was very sick of working on this project. I just wanted to reach that end point and kind of move on to the next thing. But I also want to still make a good, high quality piece. So obviously I'm not skimping on the quality here, we're just doing things a little bit easier. But this is where the project took a really good turn when I realized that my drawer dividers were not properly aligned. So when we were putting together the casework here, I had gotten one of my drawer dividers perfectly an inch off of the other one. So in whatever measurement I was taking, however I laid these out, I don't remember, I ended up getting them off by an inch, which meant that both the drawer boxes I had weren't gonna work, but also I couldn't use them even after taking out these middle dividers. So I had to go back to square one and completely redesign and figure out how I was going to put drawers back in this cabinet. Also after this little bit of a nerve-wracking approach to knocking out these middle dividers. And so I sat down and I tried to figure out a few different options that I had. You know, there's all kinds of different things you can do to solve problems in woodworking. And this is one of the single most important things, one of the most important lessons I can tell to anyone getting into woodworking is to not stress about making mistakes. Because one of the things that is going to make you a better woodworker every single time is when you make a mistake like this on a project. This project is basically done at this point. And I had to go through, cut out those pieces, and luckily because I had that painted interior, it wasn't too hard to touch up, but also if you had just a raw or natural wood interior, it would be a little bit easier. Either way, you're always able to find a solution to those mistakes. So as I throw together some quick maple drawer boxes here, this is basically following the same ideas we were using before, except this time we're going to change it up a little bit and we're going to use some false drawer fronts. So I made these drawer boxes out of just some hard maple, and then we're going to put a piece of cherry on the front edge to give us a nice continuous grain all the way through. Then we can just mount some very simple guides on the inside of the casework, and that will make life a lot easier. Now, originally with these drawers, I was planning to just leave them maple, but when I started putting things together, I realized I didn't like the how bright the maple was. So at first I thought it would be great to just go through and paint the inside of the drawer. That way it would have a kind of a similar matching appearance to the cabinet when you open it up. Also adding some leather to the bottom of the drawers so that we don't scratch up the paint on the inside of the cabinet, because that was something I was also kind of concerned about. So going through and doing all this, these drawers, I was happy with them in the way that they looked, and again, this is near the end of the project, so I just wanted to get things done. So I'm definitely making more rash decisions. But as much as possible, I'm trying to force myself to slow down and pay attention to what I'm doing so that I don't accidentally make a mistake that I can't come back from, or I end up having to remake the drawer boxes, because again, this is already the second set. Now, one of the things you're also going to notice with this video is there's going to be a lot of jumping around. We're going to go from having one drawer box fit up to now we're done and putting the drawer fronts on. And this also is just because I was just trying to get this project done. This was a very challenging bit to try and figure out. You can see here we did manage to get that beautiful continuous grain going across the front, which I was super in love with. Also making sure that it lines up with my stained glass, because that was, again, luckily I was kind of thinking about what I was doing. Otherwise I could have really made an annoying mistake there. But anyway, the video clips are going to be a little bit more staggered or jumpy, because there was times where I thought about doing something and I just jumped in and did it and forgot to turn the camera on. So I tried to capture as much as I could and try to show as much of a picture of what I was doing at this point. But there is going to be some gaps here and there just because I was so focused on the project. Again, another really good idea that I did beforehand is I put some 3/8 holes in the back so that I could actually get these drawers out when I put them all in. So luckily there is some good examples here of times where I was actually thinking about what I was doing before jumping and doing things, because it would have been really bad if I'd had to kind of drill into the back of this thing with the drawers all stuck in there or something. But anyway, yes, you can see here that we're going to run into another problem, and that is when we go through and finish off these drawer boxes by putting on the fronts, putting on everything, they start to look really rough. And this is, again, another jump cut, but I decided to go through and paint all parts of the drawer, including the sides of the drawer front. And this specifically would be that so that you'd end up with a very dark line in between the drawers. And I absolutely love the way that this looks, because when we go through, clean up that front face, we have that really nice, clean, natural wood. But then on all the sides of the drawer fronts, we've got that really rich, dark green color, which I just think looks so beautiful. And then of course, going through and applying our final coats of finish, and that is just going to make all the cherry on this absolutely pop. Because the best part about this project too is just with the amount of time I spent working on it, this cherry has had a ton of time to just start aging naturally. And it looks so good with that first coat of oil on it. And then our final step is to go in and actually mount in the stained glass into the doors. Now I didn't do this in the previous video when we actually finished off those windows, because I wanted to wait till the very end, because there's always going to be times where you're going to have to work on the doors or have things swinging around. And earlier in the video when I showed them mounted on the cabinet with the windows in there, I just had them temporarily tacked in with some picture frame holders. But this is going to be how we actually hold them in. So these are 3/16 by 3/16 square pieces of cherry that I milled up, and just breaking the edges so I don't get injured, and they're just held in with some 3/4 inch pin nails. And this is more than strong enough to hold those windows in there permanently, but it also means that I can very easily take these windows out if they ever get damaged. So with that, the cabinet is now fully completed, and we can actually go and put it all together. And this was one of the best moments, one of the best days and I can remember in the past year of my life, is getting to actually put this cabinet together and see how good it came out. Alright guys, so this officially does it for the Aquila display cabinet. It is now fully completed, and I'm very excited to be at this point. This is the absolute longest I've ever spent on a single project, and I'm so glad to have it done, not only because now I get to actually enjoy this piece of furniture, but because I now get to move on to all the other things I've been thinking of over the past few months. I have a ton of different types and styles and different hobbies and different types of projects that I want to get going on, and I just have this long list currently saved up, and I'm just going to kind of start checking things off soon. And I'm very excited about that. Now, looking back at the cabinet here, this is probably going to be one of my all-time favorite pieces of furniture I will ever make. Mostly because of just kind of the period of my life in which it existed in. Because right now, while I've been transitioning into this new position at my job, you know, I started this job as kind of a part-time thing to make a little bit of extra money until YouTube someday kicks off. And kind of over the span of the last 6 months, I've kind of transitioned from that thinking of, you know, someday YouTube's going to kick off and that'll be my job, but for now this will work, to now I kind of have a bit of a career. And it's nice to kind of change my mindset there, because it's not that I don't believe in YouTube, it's more so it's just a much more balanced way of looking at life. Which is very important, because one of the things I definitely struggled with, especially early on with this project, was being able to afford all the different parts that go into it. You know, everything from the stained glass to the lumber to the hardware, everything to do with this cabinet, or at least getting the materials for this cabinet, was very, very expensive, and I struggled quite a bit at the beginning. But now that I'm in a bit of a better paying job, and you know, I'm getting more hours and whatnot, things are starting to stabilize a little bit more, which is really good. It means I can actually devote more time to all these different hobbies and creating all this different stuff and making these YouTube videos. And then someday when YouTube does take off as well, I can have that kind of dual income supporting this whole hobby that I have, or this whole craft. So I'm very excited about that. But again, looking back at this cabinet, this thing has some of my absolute favorite features. A lot of the design that went into this specific piece, in my opinion, it's actually really awesome. And the hardest part about that to me is a lot of the design decisions that were made with this cabinet were reactionary decisions, which is, it's kind of funny to think about, but even I talked about this in the first video all the way to the end, is things like why I chose to paint the inside or why I chose to use the trim. It started out because I had that really crappy cherry with a ton of sapwood around the edges, so I had to find a way to make that work, and the best way to do that was by throwing on a little bit of trim, and I think that that has completely changed the way that this project looked. Same thing with painting the whole interior, and at the very end of the videos you guys saw, I painted the drawers. All these little design decisions led to making this piece something that is totally unique and interesting. And of course, the best last minute design decision that I made was changing up that stained glass. Going through and doing something that is much more complicated, but also much more the style that I want to do going forward. That was just an awesome choice, and I'm very glad that I kind of took the risk and went for it, because this is the end result of this cabinet is just amazing in my opinion. And again, I know not everyone is going to like this specific style, you know, using paint or using the stained glass, whatever, right? Everyone has their own tastes and preferences. And I think this piece will always be one that is very important to me, because I feel like I'm kind of starting a new era of my woodworking, where I'm not just worrying about trying to be good at woodworking, I'm trying to think about how I can constantly be improving. And I've reached a point now where I do start to recognize that I do have some skill as a woodworker. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm one of the best out there. In fact, I still think I've got a lot to learn as a woodworker, but I can definitely start to recognize that I do have just a little bit of skill, which for me is something that it's been kind of challenging to, you know, figure out whether it's just skill or dumb luck. And so when I look at this project, again, it just makes me feel really, really confident moving forward that no matter what project I decide to do in the future, I have a very good chance of being able to pull it off. It might take me a very long time, but eventually I can figure out how to finish off that project and get it to the point where it does look absolutely amazing. So as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this project, and I will see you in the next one.